Hello, Tungsten Miner here. This is going to be a continuation of the series on advanced rocketry. So let's jump right in. This time, I'm going to be talking about how to do an asteroid mining mission. And as you can see, there's quite a lot of stuff involved here. It's going to be a long one. So I wanted to start with just kind of framing the overall process so that you can follow what we're going through as we're going through it. So the basic notion is that in order to mine an asteroid, you first need to find the asteroid. And that's a process of launching up a satellite that can look around for you and see if it can find some data that will help you find an asteroid that you actually want to go and mine. Then you're going to refine the location data. So you need a couple more satellites that can pick up different sorts of data and really hone in on exactly which ones you're looking at. Once you've built yourself a marker chip that contains all of the researched data for that one asteroid, then you can put it on a rocket and send the rocket off after the asteroid that you've selected. But you can't do this with just any old rocket, so there's a little bit involved in building a rocket that's suitable for harvesting ores from an asteroid. So that's the overall process we're going to talk about. Get a satellite up to find the thing, get a few more satellites up to refine your data, build yourself a chip, and there's a couple of machines involved with that locates the asteroid, and then finally set up a rocket that's able to go do the mining. So let's get to it. These are satellite building machines. This is a creative power block. You need some kind of power block underneath the machine to power it, but that's kind of it. So it's like a two-block, multi-block machine, sort of. This one is not in the hollow projector, so you just have to know satellite builder on top of a power block, and that's all there is. There are a lot of parts that can go into a satellite, and I'm actually going to ignore a lot of them for today because there are other kinds of satellite missions that you might want to run that don't have to do with asteroids necessarily. So I'm going to focus just on the subset of pieces that you need for this particular task. Okay, so first of all, you need to build yourself a satellite. Recipe for this guy is just aluminum sheets, titanium rods, and a control circuit board. So it's really not actually all that terribly expensive, except that this doesn't get you anything. This satellite, if you were to launch it, would do absolutely nothing at all. So we need to look at the stuff that's over here. In this top corner, you put the sensor, which is the primary purpose of this particular satellite. And obviously you can only have one kind of these main types of sensors. So here I've selected an optical sensor, just some gold, glowstone, and glass, so not too bad. Things start to get expensive in a hurry at this point of advanced rocketry, so you can start to expect to see the recipes be a lot more demanding as we get along. I'm not really getting into the recipes of the machines, but when you look them up, you'll be like, okay, yeah, lots of work to do to gather materials here. So anyway, this is the first satellite you want to build because it's going to get you distance data. And that's one of the three kinds of data that you're going to collect about asteroids. Distance data is important because you need it first and you need the most of it. So it's best to get that satellite started early. And in fact, you may decide that you want two of them, but we'll get back to that later. The components that I'm loading this satellite with are in these 6 boxes here. So first of all, satellite needs a way to collect power. So basic solar panel, again, not cheap, but not too bad. Small battery, which is actually pretty straightforward. Those are tin plates, by the way. And then finally, you need yourself a data storage unit because what this satellite is going to do is it's going to use this sensor to scan the space around your base and collect distance data to various objects. This does require power, so you need to be able to capture and store power. And then finally, it's going to store data on board the satellite. And then eventually, you're going to build a machine that lets you download that data to your local base and start using it. So you can actually put more data chips in here, but you need at least one. Otherwise, it won't be able to store any data at all. So I'm going to before I get on to that, actually, talk about these satellite chips. Once you've launched your satellite, you need some way to know where it is and which one you're talking about, and tell the various machines you're going to have to use which satellite you particularly want to connect to. So the way you do that is you build yourself this satellite chip, which is really dead simple. It's just basic circuit, which is itself a basic circuit plate, which you make in a precision assembler, gold, redstone, silicon wafer. Silicon wafer is your silicon boule, which comes out of your crystallizer, and you can get the silicon from your electric arc furnace. So all the stuff that I talked about way back in the first mod spotlight on advanced rocketry is now coming back into play. This is how you build all of this stuff. And of course, you will have already had to build a bunch of this stuff a bunch of different times before you even got all these machines built. Anyway, so back to it. So we're going to build this guy, and we leave this chip in this center spot. Ignore this one for now. And that's going to get programmed with the ID number of this satellite. So I hit build, it scoops up all the parts, and it's putting them on board the satellite, which now we can see it's an optical telescope. It's got a new ID. It can generate power, it can store data, right? So this is actually like a useful machine now. And this has been programmed to have the same ID as the satellite we just built. Now this chip is empty. And what we want to do here is sometimes you need to connect to a satellite in multiple places, but you also kind of want to back up because this is now the very only object in the entire game which can connect to the satellite. And once we've launched the thing, we can't make another chip. So it's just gone if you lose this ID chip. So I can say write to secondary chip, and it's going to go through its little processing step. And now I have two chips that both know how to connect to this guy. So my advice is to create two chips straight off the bat and then have a really, really safe place where you put all of your extra satellite ID chips. And then you can just have one that you have floating around that you use for actually doing things. Okay, let's quickly go through the other two types of satellites. Mostly they're the same. The only thing that's really different is which kind of sensor. So your composition sensor is figuring out what sort of ore is in that asteroid. And it's going to allow you to download composition data instead of distance data. And you'll need one of these rockets as well, because before you have fully identified the asteroid and quite collected all the data you need to be able to successfully mine it, you're going to need to fill up an asteroid ID chip with three kinds of data. Distance data, which we've already got from our first satellite, this composition data, which we're going to get from this satellite, and then mass data from this third satellite. So you're going to need to make at least three satellites. Now, you may wish to make a fourth distance satellite, and you'll see why in just a few minutes. So I have actually already built a bunch of satellites, so I'm just going to keep track of this one and leave those other two alone. Next, we need to talk about how do you get the satellites into orbit? Well, I'm sure you're not surprised to learn this has to do with making a rocket to send it up into orbit. And you can see this looks a lot like the rocket I've made in the earlier series of this mod spotlight. But the thing that's different is this block right here. This is a satellite bay. And if I shift right click on my rocket here, we can see satellite bay, guidance computer. Guidance computer just has the same planetary chip that we talked about in the last mod spotlight. But this satellite bay is new. If I click on here, it's got an open spot, and I can drop my satellite, which now should be finished, right? If you're not going to get it back again, you won't be able to change anything about this satellite. So be really quite sure that you really want to send this thing off before you do. But if you're happy with it, you stuff it on there. I've already built this rocket, so it doesn't need building. I've already fueled this rocket, so it doesn't need fuel. So we just need to launch the thing. So here we've got our monitoring station. Now this is a block that allows you to launch a rocket without a human on board. So previously I've just done moon rockets where we got on there and we navigated the rocket ourselves. Now what we want to do is have this thing go off by itself with no people to guide it. So I've already put the chip on there, and we can see around Earth, all good. But now we need a way to launch it, and there's nobody sitting on there to hit the launch button. Now this block is not powered, and it doesn't actually need to be particularly close. So it's not part of this launch complex at all. It can be any place you like. I happen to put it here because obviously that's the easiest place for me to have it. However, I have used my linker, just like we linked the fuel loader to the rocket builder. I've done the same thing. I've linked this mission control block, in a sense, to the rocket builder. And that way, when the rocket goes up and the rocket comes back down, it reconnects itself back to this same monitoring station. So we put our rocket on there. We've got our guidance set. We've got fuel on boards. That's really kind of everything. We just need to push this thing into space. So I'm going to hit launch here. A few seconds later, off it goes. So this is going to go up, and it's going to take, I don't know, 30 seconds, a minute, something like that. And once it's gotten up into orbit, the chip that I have here will be able to be used to connect to that particular satellite. So let's move on while that's happening. How do you connect to the satellite? Well, you need one of these satellite terminal blocks. So here, right now, there's no link at all. I can put my satellite chip in here, and you can see it's a little confused. This is kind of a bug. Until the satellite's really up there, it kind of like remembers the last, whatever, it's a bug. Once the satellite's up there, though, we'll actually get like a real connection. Still going. There it goes. See, now it says optical telescope, recognizes the data storage, I can connect. And now the data on the satellite is gone to 0 because I've moved the data into the buffer on this satellite terminal. And now what I might want to do is use this data somewhere else. And in fact, that's our very next step. And there's a couple of ways to do that. So first of all, I could grab this data storage chip. I drop it in the I/O port and I click store to chip. And now the chip is full, the buffer is empty, and you can see the satellite's up there, it's doing its thing, it slowly collects more data. But what if I wanted to do this in an easier way? Come on, you. Yeah, these things are a little glitchy. I've had difficulties with them from time to time where it says you ought to be able to move things back in the buffer and can't, but sometimes it works totally fine. So we're going to connect again. We've got 5 data there. Okay, so we've got 1,000 there. We've got 5 there. The other way of moving data around that I wanted to talk about is this wireless transceiver. And you're going to need a linker to help with this. So what you do is you stick one of these on the side of a box that can produce data, like this satellite terminal, and you stick another one on the side of a data bus, like this guy here, and then you take your linker and you shift right click on one of the wireless terminals and you shift right click on the other one and it says, okay, coordinates programmed, link successfully, terrific. And then when I right click on this thing, I want to turn it on and I want to start extracting data. And over here, I don't want to extract data, I want to receive data, so I'm going to leave this alone. And then I click this to turn this one on. And now we should see the data that's coming in from the satellite slowly start to get transferred little by little into this other device. I can, of course, take this data storage unit and just convert all that data over as well and fill this thing up. So as more data comes in from the satellite, since the satellite's chip is in this terminal, it's going to automatically download it into this buffer. But since we've got this wireless transceiver attached, this is going to beam the data over to this other wireless transceiver, which will then deposit it into the data bus here. So what's this thing? This is the observatory, and it is exactly what you'd think. So I'm going to make it nighttime. This is one of my favorite multi-blocks in the whole game. And you get this enormous space telescope. This thing is just fantastic. Okay, so what does this thing do? Well, if we click on the interface, we can see we've got our data coming in. I've already turned it on. I've got it hooked up with Creative Power, so we're all set there. And then when you hit scan, it looks around the universe and it tries to find asteroids by interpreting the data that you've given it. Now, the particular asteroids you'll see here depend upon your mod pack. I've configured this mod pack to have its own specific kind of asteroids based upon what other mods and what metals and things get used in this particular one. But if you use just the default one, there'll be only certain kind of asteroids that you'll see. There's only like 2 defaults. So your mileage may vary. Whatever you see here is very variable. But you're going to get these 5 different asteroids. And unfortunately, the UI for me is a little messed up and I can't see what this one is. But I can see it's got some aluminum and it's got some zinc in there. So I've got some idea. And there's very little of each, so this is probably small. If I click on the medium silver one, it's a bit bigger. Yeah, so I can move this around. I've not been able to move this around. Yeah, so whatever, I don't know. Small nickel, so I've got some nickel, I've got some iron, I've got a little bit of iridium, so that's actually kind of tempting, right? Iridium's pretty rare. Small copper, tiny silver, medium silver. So the way I organize things is I have tiny, small, medium, large, and huge asteroids of various kind of predominant ores that you find in the world. But let's say this is the one that we find most attractive. Oh, where'd my asteroid chip go? I had one in there. Okay, well, we'll just grab another one. So this is the start of the process of identifying an asteroid. So we've beamed down some distance data and we've used the distance data to get the observatory to find the particular asteroid that we want to get. And now I'm going to click on this little gears symbol here, and that has now programmed this asteroid chip with the identifier of the asteroid I wanted. But you'll notice in the tooltip, there's all those different kinds of data that is now 0 of 1000, right? It's all missing from this chip. Well, in order to have a successful mission, you need at least distance data, composition data, and mass data. And if you look at some of these other temperature, humidity, and so forth, these are more planet data, and we'll talk about that a lot later. Asteroids don't really need that stuff, but you do need distance, mass, and composition. If you have 1,000 out of 1,000 for each of these, you have a 100% chance that your mission is going to be successful and you'll get some stuff back again. If you have less than that, the mission might work or it might not, in proportion to how much data is missing. So best to just let it fill it up. So I'm going to grab this chip and let's make it daytime again so we can see what we're doing. And the next step is to come over here. And obviously these are more satellite terminals, and these are hooked up to the satellites that I prepared beforehand. So these have long since been connected and downloading data. And as you can see, there's no data here, which means I've got them set up with wireless links to this machine back here. This is an Astro Body data processor. And the way this thing works is you put an asteroid chip in it, and this is the one that I had previously set up, and every bit of data that comes down from your satellites and gets beamed over to this machine then gets loaded into these buffers, and the buffers then get used as research points to fill up the capacity of the asteroid chip that you've selected. So I've had this one going for a little while, and it's mostly full of all these different kinds of data. So I'm going to just pluck it out here, and I'm going to stick this other one in there. The data itself is pretty fungible. It doesn't really pertain to anything. It's just, think of it as kind of like a liquid that you use to fill up the chip. So right now I've got a little bit stored up in the buffers here, and so this one is able to zip through and add lots of points really quickly. These other 2 buffers obviously are empty, and they're only getting filled intermittently as data comes down from the satellites. So those are going to take a little while. Obviously, if you've used up all the data that you've collected and you're waiting for more data from the satellite, this process can take a good long while. So this is the kind of thing where you get yourself to this stage and set it up and then go off and work on something else for a while. Or you make yourself a bunch more satellites so that you can pull down data a lot more quickly. But whichever way, we've now got ourselves an asteroid chip, which is full enough where we're probably going to be fine. So the last stage here of asteroid mining is to send off a rocket that's capable of doing the mining. So here I've got a new rocket that's largely the same as the ones we've seen before. So 3 engines, 3 tanks per engine, some structure blocks, a guidance computer. What's really different here is on the top. So here I've got a drill, which we can peek at. That's this guy right here. So just machine structure block and iron pickaxe, super, super cheap. And I've got some chests to hold whatever it is that comes back off the asteroid. So word of caution, if you stick your asteroid chip in and you don't have a drill, you'll just use up your asteroid chip and it's gone. If you have a drill, but you have no storage and you send this thing off, then it will go off and it won't be able to hold anything. And so again, you will lose any value you might have had in that asteroid chip. And then finally, if you have insufficient storage, you will find that it drills all the cobblestone off the asteroid first and never does get around to the ores. So be quite sure you've included enough capacity and that you've got your drill and that everything is in order before you send this thing along, because you won't get anything back again otherwise. Asteroid mining does take a while, right? It takes, I don't know, roughly 15 minutes for even a moderately sized asteroid. So you can add more drills to make the process go faster if you want. So over here, I've got the same basic setup, my fueling, my builder, got my mission control. So I'm going to shift right click on this thing, and I'm going to put this asteroid chip that I have populated into the guidance computer. Now, one thing you'll notice, and it's worth pointing out, I do not have a seat on this rocket. If you have a seat, my observation is that the whole process just doesn't work. The thing goes up in orbit, it does nothing at all and comes back down again. It doesn't eat up your asteroid chip, fortunately, but it just doesn't do anything. So be sure if you're going to reuse the same basic rocket kind of infrastructure, which I do in my survivor world, that you've been careful to like strip it down and build it back up again with the right components if you're changing from one kind of mission to another. So here we're at launch control. I'm going to hit launch. We'll wait for our little countdown, and this thing will head off into the sky. Okay, so the initial stage of the mission has begun. However, there's more to it than that. So as we watch here, this mission progress, we can see it's getting to max velocity, it's consuming fuel, it's raising altitude. Once it's gotten to its maximum altitude, this whole mission progress thing becomes relevant. It's not turned on yet because it hasn't actually begun the mission. The rocket's still climbing. So we'll give this just a moment. And here we go. So we've set things up correctly. We've got a valid chip. We've got all the other stuff, set up correctly. And it is now mining the asteroid. Depending upon, I'm not entirely sure what, to be honest. They can take a different amount of time to do. Most of the time I've seen them be 15 minutes. But I'm sure there's some rationale as to what causes things to take longer or less time. Anyway, so here we are. We've got 14 minutes, 30 seconds left on the mission. And we can see the mission progress is being tracked by the slow filling in of these little buttons here. And then obviously we're going to get up to here and then come back down here, get back down here. And once all of the little buttons have been filled in, the rocket will be back on the ground. So I'm going to pause the video here and not make you wait through all of that. Once the rocket is approaching the end of the mission, I will turn things back on again and we can watch the very tail end of this mission play out. So be right back. Okay, the mission just finished, so we should expect to see the rocket heading down anytime now. And when it gets down, what we'll have to do is to start unpacking things and see, yeah, so here we come. Should see it any minute now. Yeah, so what we'll find out is when it gets back down again, we'll take a look inside the chests and see how much of what kinds of things it actually is bringing back to us. There it is, that little spot right in the middle of the sun. Okay. So, in the first chest, it looks like the only one, we've got some lead, got some yellowite, silver ore, regular silver ore, and a bunch of cobblestone. So, that gives you pretty much the whole span of what to do with your asteroid missions. So, quick review here. You start off by making yourself a distance satellite, and then soon thereafter you're going to want a mass and composition satellite, maybe a fourth satellite, another distance one, because you need that data so much. Then you build yourself a simple rocket with a satellite bay to send that up into orbit. Going to need to make yourself a monitoring station so that you can actually launch the rocket unmanned and then monitor its progress. As it goes up, it's come back down. Next, you're going to need a satellite terminal. You can get by with only one, but if you've got multiple satellites, you're going to be switching things out a bunch. So best to make 3 of them to start with. You can move data around with data chips, but these wireless boxes are a bit more convenient. Next, you need to have yourself a observatory where you're going to actually take that original distance data and scan for asteroids that you might want to mine. Once you've done that, you make yourself your asteroid chip, but your asteroid chip at this point will be empty, so you need to bring it over to an astro body data processor and fill it up with each of the 3 different kinds of data: composition, distance, and mass. And this one's, partly done. In order to do that, you will need to have your satellite terminals connected to your 3 different kinds of satellites. And then finally, once the chip is all full of data, you'll bring it over to a special rocket that is specifically for mining asteroids, which has to have a drill and some storage, as well as guidance computer, where you put your asteroid chip and then use your rocket monitoring station to send it off to go get you some good stuff. So that is it for this part of the mod spotlight on advanced rocketry. Talk to you later.